Story the blacksmith found her in the rain, sitting at the fork where the old garrison road met the river trail, holding the pieces of a sword and crying like the world had ended. Darian Xavier did not stop because he was kind, though he supposed he was not cruel, but because the orc girl sat directly in the center of the fork, blocking both paths, and his wagon would not fit around her. He pulled the mule to a halt, water streaming from the brim of his hat, and waited. When she did not move, he climbed down and walked closer, his boots squelching in the mud. She looked up at him with eyes the color of new copper, bright against her green skin. Tears cut clean tracks through the grime on her cheeks. Her dark hair hung in wet ropes around her shoulders, and her tusks, small and white, caught the gray afternoon light. She wore traveling clothes, leather and wool, practical things, but they were soaked through. In her lap lay 2 pieces of a sword, the blade snapped clean through about a hand's width from the hilt. "Move," Darian said. Not unkindly, but not gently either. She stared at him, rain and tears mixing on her face, and did not move. He waited another moment, then sighed and crouched down beside her, balancing on the balls of his feet. He gestured at the sword. "May I?" She handed him the pieces without a word. The break was recent, the metal still bright where it had fractured. The blade was old, though, very old. The steel had been folded countless times, the pattern still visible despite decades or perhaps centuries of use and care. The tang ran through a hilt wrapped in worn leather, and the pommel bore a maker's mark he did not recognize. Orcish, probably. The metal itself felt wrong in his hands, too light for its size, and when he fitted the 2 pieces together, he could see the fracture had propagated from a flaw deep in the core. "What happened?" he asked. "My cousin broke it." Her voice was hoarse, barely louder than the rain. "She twisted it against a rock while I was sleeping. She wants Thagar to marry her instead." Darian studied the break again, turning the pieces in the light. "Thagar. The man I was supposed to marry. The sword was my dowry." She took a shaking breath. "It belonged to my grandmother and her mother before her. Without it, I have nothing to bring. The elders will not bless a marriage without a dowry. Thagar's family will not accept me, so get a different sword." She looked at him like he had suggested she grow wings and fly. "This sword is my family's blade. It is the only thing I have that proves my bloodline. My parents are dead. I have no siblings, no gold, no land. Just this." She touched the broken blade with one finger and her hand was shaking. "Now I have nothing." Darian was quiet for a long moment, rain dripping from his hat onto the mud between them. Then he stood, still holding the pieces, and walked back to his wagon. The girl watched him, confusion replacing some of the despair on her face. He returned with a leather roll, which he unfolded on a relatively dry patch of ground beneath a scrubby pine. Inside were his tools, hammers of various sizes, tongs, files, a small anvil that could be staked into the ground. He studied the broken sword again, holding each piece up to examine the grain of the metal, the way the fracture had formed. "What are you doing?" the girl asked, looking. He traced the break with his thumb. "The metal is old, good steel, but it has been stressed. There is a flaw here, see? A pocket of slag that was never worked out. That is where it snapped. Your cousin only finished what time started. Can you fix it?" He did not answer immediately. He fit the pieces together again, studying how they aligned, checking the straightness of the blade. Finally, he looked at her. "I can reforge it, but I will need a proper forge, not a roadside fire, and it will take time." "How much time?" "A day, maybe 2 if the weld does not take the first time." He began rolling up his tools. "Where is your clan?" 2 miles north in the hills. "We are camped near the old quarry." "Then get in the wagon. You can show me." She stood slowly, still holding the broken pieces like they might dissolve if she let go. "Why would you help me?" Darian climbed onto the wagon seat and picked up the reins. "Because you are blocking the road, and I want to get to Millward before nightfall. If I fix your sword, you will move." It was not entirely true, but it was not entirely false either, and the girl seemed to accept it. She climbed into the back of the wagon, settling among his tools and supplies, and did not speak as they rolled north into the hills. Her name was Kera, and she was 19 years old. Darian learned this as they drove, the rain finally easing into a gray drizzle. She told him about her family, or the lack of it. Her parents had died in a raid 5 years ago, cut down by human soldiers who had mistaken their hunting party for bandits. She had been living with her uncle's family since then, but they had many children of their own and few resources. The sword had been her only inheritance, the only thing of value she possessed. "Thagger is a good man," she said, staring at the broken blade in her hands. "He is strong and his family has land. He agreed to marry me even though I have no parents to speak for me, no wealth. He said the sword was enough, that it proved I came from warrior stock." She touched one of the pieces, her fingers gentle on the old steel. "Now he will not want me. Why would he? I am nobody." Darian said nothing. He was not good with words, never had been. His father had been a blacksmith, and his father before him, and they had taught him that metal spoke more clearly than men ever could. You learned to listen to the ring of a hammer on steel, the color of heated iron, the way a blade sang when you quenched it. People were more complicated, their words often meaning something other than what they said. The orc camp sat in a hollow near the old quarry, a collection of sturdy tents and wagons arranged in a loose circle. Smoke rose from cook fires, and Darian could see perhaps 30 or 40 individuals moving about, adults and children, all orcs, all stopping to stare as his wagon rolled into view. A tall orc man stepped forward, his hand on the haft of an axe. His skin was a deeper green than Kera's, weathered by sun and wind, and his tusks were prominent. "Kera, who is this human?" "This is Darian Xavier," Kera said, climbing down from the wagon. "He is a blacksmith. He is going to fix my sword." The tall orc's eyes narrowed. "What happened to your sword?" "It broke." She did not mention her cousin, and Darian noticed the omission. "He says he can reforge it, but he needs a forge." Another orc stepped forward, this one older, with gray shot through her dark hair. She wore beads woven into her braids and carried herself with the air of someone used to being obeyed. "I am Elder Nasha. You are the smith," Darian nodded. "Why would you help her?" "Because I can." He gestured at the broken sword, still in Kera's hands. "That is good steel, old steel. It should not go to waste." The elder studied him for a long moment, her copper eyes unreadable. Then she turned to the tall orc. "Garak, show him to the forge. If he can mend the blade, let him work." The forge was a simple setup near the edge of camp, a stone hearth with a bellows, an anvil that had seen better days, and a quenching trough. It would do. Darian unloaded his tools while Kera watched, still holding the sword pieces like a talisman. Garak stood nearby, arms crossed, clearly suspicious of the human in their midst. "I will need coal," Darian said. "And water for the trough. Is there a grinding wheel in the supply tent?" Garak did not move to help, just watched. Kera set the sword down carefully on a work table and went to fetch what he needed. Darian examined the forge, checking the condition of the firebrick, testing the bellows. Adequate. Not excellent, but adequate. He had worked with worse. By the time Kera returned with a bucket of coal and another of water, he had a small fire going. He fed it carefully, building the heat, while she stood to one side and watched. Other orcs drifted closer, curious, but kept their distance. He ignored them and focused on his work. "This will take several hours," he said, not looking up from the fire. "You do not need to stay. I want to watch." So she stayed and watched. As the forge heated, Darian laid out his tools with the precision of long practice hammers arranged by weight, tongs by size, files and rasps in order of coarseness. He heated a piece of scrap iron to test the forge's temperature, studied the color, adjusted the airflow from the bellows. Only when he was satisfied did he take the broken sword and examine it once more in the growing firelight. The break would need to be prepared first, ground clean to expose fresh metal, the edges scarfed to create a proper weld joint. He took the pieces to the grinding wheel and worked carefully, the stone throwing sparks, until both surfaces were bright and angled. Kera watched every movement, her face intent. When the pieces were prepared, he placed the blade section in the forge, heating it slowly and evenly. Too fast and the old steel would crack. Too slow and he would waste coal. He judged it by color: black to red to orange to yellow, and by the way the metal began to shimmer in the heat. When it reached the right temperature, he pulled it out with tongs and laid it on the anvil. He sprinkled a pinch of borax on the hot metal, where it melted and flowed, coating the prepared surface. He heated the hilt section the same way, then brought both pieces to welding temperature: a bright yellow, almost white, just shy of sparking. Moving quickly now, he positioned the scarfed edges together on the anvil and brought his hammer down. The first blow married the pieces. The second and third set the weld. He worked in a rhythm as old as smithing itself, each strike deliberate, each movement economical. The metal protested at first, reluctant to join, but gradually it yielded. He worked the weld from the center outward, ensuring even pressure, preventing voids. When he was satisfied, he returned the blade to the forge to even out the heat, then back to the anvil for more work. It took 2 hours. By the end, his shirt was soaked with sweat despite the cool air, and his arms ached. But the sword was whole again, the weld invisible in the hot metal. He heated it one final time, judging the color carefully, then plunged it into the quenching trough. The water boiled and steamed, and the blade sang a high, clear note that rang across the camp. Darian lifted it out, examined it in the firelight, checking for warps or cracks. The blade was straight, the weld solid. He set it aside to cool slowly in the evening air and finally looked at Kera. She was crying again, but differently this time. "You did it." "Not yet. It needs to be tempered, sharpened, balanced. Tomorrow." But when tomorrow came and he tested the blade properly, striking it against the anvil, flexing it to check the spring, the weld failed. Not catastrophically, but undeniably. A crack appeared at the tang, right where the old metal met the new weld, and Darian swore under his breath. Kera, who had been smiling for the first time since he met her, went pale. "What happened?" "The old steel is more brittle than I thought." The weld held, but the metal around it did not. He turned the blade in his hands, studying the new fracture. It had not broken through completely, not yet, but it would. The first hard blow would finish it. "I am sorry." She sat down heavily on a nearby stump, all the hope draining from her face. Darian stared at the sword, frustration knotting in his chest. He had been careful. He had done everything right. But sometimes right was not enough. Sometimes the metal itself betrayed you, old stresses and hidden flaws rising up to ruin even the best work. "I can try again," he heard himself say. Kera looked up. "What? I can reforge it again, but not with the same steel. The metal is too old, too stressed. I would need to fold in new steel, blend it with the old. It will change the blade slightly, but it will be stronger." He hesitated. "But I would need better steel than what I have in my wagon, and it would take longer, much longer." Elder Nasha had been standing nearby, listening. She stepped forward now, her expression thoughtful. "How much longer? Weeks, maybe." I would need to source the right ore, smelt it properly, forge it to match the old steel's quality, and I would need a better forge than this. No offense, he added, none taken. Nasha studied him with those sharp copper eyes. Why would you do this? You have already tried once and failed. You owe this girl nothing. Darian looked at the broken sword again, at the centuries of history folded into its steel, at the careful workmanship of some long-dead smith who had made something meant to last. He thought about his own father, teaching him that a blade was more than just metal, it was trust given form. That a smith's reputation rested on the strength of every weld, the edge of every blade. Because I said I would fix it, he said simply. And it is not fixed yet. Nasha was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. There is an old iron mine 2 valleys west. It was abandoned 20 years ago, but the ore there is good, very good. If you can smelt it properly, it will serve. You may use our forge and you may travel with us while you work. We do not move quickly and we will be in these hills for another month at least. Elder, Garak began, his tone sharp. Enough. Nasha silenced him with a look. The girl needs her dowry and the smith has offered to help. We will give him that chance. She turned back to Darian. But I will ask you again why. Truly, Darian met her gaze steadily. Because good work matters, and because she should not lose her future over bad steel. The elder nodded slowly. Very well. Kera, you will assist him. It is your sword. You should know its remaking. So Darian stayed. He sent word to Millward that he would be delayed, traded some of his tools for supplies, and set about the long work of reforging the sword properly. The Orc clan accepted his presence with wary tolerance. He was useful, and the elder had given her approval, but he was still human, still an outsider. He slept in his wagon and ate his own meals apart from theirs, and most of the Orcs gave him a wide berth, except Kera. She was at the forge every day from dawn until dusk, watching everything he did with intense focus. At first she just observed, but gradually she began to help. She learned to work the bellows, keeping the fire at an even temperature. She fetched tools when he needed them, water when the trough ran low. She asked questions, endless questions about the metal, the heat, the way the hammer fell. Why do you strike at an angle there? She asked one morning as he worked a billet of newly smelted iron on the anvil. To fold the steel, he said, not pausing in his rhythm. You fold it, weld it, fold it again. Each fold drives out impurities, evens out the carbon. The more you fold, the stronger and more flexible the blade becomes. How many times will you fold it? As many as it takes. He plunged the billet back into the forge, heating it again. Your grandmother's blade was folded at least 50 times, maybe more. I will match that if I can. She watched as he pulled the glowing steel out and returned to hammering, sparks flying with each strike. You care about this. I care about all my work. No, she shook her head. This is different. You could have just welded it and been done, even if it would break again eventually. But you are doing it right. You are taking weeks of your time for a stranger. Darian did not answer. He was not sure he knew how to put it into words, the satisfaction of a weld that held, the pride in a blade that would last generations, the simple rightness of fixing something that was broken. His father had taught him that smithing was not just a trade but a kind of trust. People brought you their plows and their swords, their hopes and their livelihoods, and they trusted you to make things that would not fail them. To do less than your best was to betray that trust. But he did not say any of that. He just kept hammering. As the days passed, Kera's role shifted from observer to apprentice. He taught her to read the color of heated steel, to judge the temperature by eye and by the shimmer of the air above it. He showed her how to hold the tongs properly, how to position a piece for hammering, how to strike with controlled force. She had strong hands and a good eye, and she learned quickly. You could be a smith, he said one afternoon, after she had successfully drawn out a piece of iron into a long, even strip. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Orc women do not become smiths. That is men's work. Human women do not usually become smiths either. But I have met a few who were better than most men. He took the strip from her and examined it critically. Good work. Even thickness, no cold shuts. You have the feel for it. She was quiet for a moment, staring at the strip of iron in his hands. What will happen after? She asked softly. After the sword is finished, you will marry your Thagger, I suppose, and I will go to Millward. Right. She turned away, going to stoke the forge. Of course. He did not miss the change in her tone, but he did not know what to make of it. Women were harder to read than metal. With steel, you had clear signs: the color, the sound, the way it moved under the hammer. With people, everything was more complicated. They traveled with the clan as promised. The orcs moved slowly, stopping frequently to hunt, to trade with passing merchants, to gather herbs and repair equipment. Darian worked at the forge whenever they made camp, and Kera was always there beside him. They fell into an easy rhythm, two people working toward a common goal, their movements gradually synchronizing. He would heat the steel, and she would have the hammer ready. She would hold a piece steady with the tongs, and he would know exactly where to strike. At night, after the work was done, they would sit by the forge and talk. Small things at first: the weather, the quality of the ore, the state of the tools. But gradually the conversations deepened. She told him about her parents, about the life they had lived before the raid. He told her about his father, about learning the trade as a boy, about the satisfaction of making something with his own hands that would outlast him. You have family? She asked one night as they watched the coals glow in the cooling forge. A sister in the south. We write occasionally, that is all. No wife, no. He poked at the coals with a rod, sending up a small shower of sparks. I travel too much, it would not be fair. But you want one, a wife. He considered the question. Someday maybe, if I found someone who did not mind the traveling, who understood the work, but that is rare. She was quiet for a long time. Then, so softly he almost missed it, she said, It should not be. The ore from the old mine was excellent, high in iron, low in impurities. Darian smelted it carefully over the course of several days, burning away the rock and slag, reducing it to pure iron. Then he carburized it, heating it with charcoal to add carbon, transforming it into steel. The process was long and exacting, requiring constant attention, and Kera stayed with him through all of it. Why add the carbon? She asked, as he buried a bar of iron in a bed of burning charcoal. Pure iron is too soft for a blade. The carbon makes it harder, lets it hold an edge. But too much carbon and it becomes brittle. You need the right amount, evenly distributed. He adjusted the airflow to the forge. That is what the folding does. It spreads the carbon through the iron, creates layers of hard and soft steel. The hard layers hold the edge, the soft layers keep the blade from shattering. How do you know when it is right? Experience and luck. He smiled faintly. Mostly experience. She smiled back, and he noticed not for the first time how the firelight made her copper eyes glow, how the planes of her face softened when she was not weeping or afraid. She was pretty, he realized. Not in the way human women were pretty, but in her own way. Strong and earnest and utterly focused when she worked, he pushed the thought away and returned to his work. When the new steel was ready, he began the final forging. He took the carefully prepared billet of folded steel and welded it to what remained of the original blade, blending old and new, history and present. The work required all his skill and concentration. The temperatures had to be perfect, the hammer blows precise, the timing exact. One mistake, and he would have to start over, and the old steel might not survive another attempt. Kera worked the bellows, keeping the fire at an even roar, and handed him tools without being asked. They moved together like a single smith with 4 hands, each anticipating the other's needs. When he drew the blade out for the final time, she was the one who quenched it, plunging it into the trough with steady hands while he watched the steam rise. The blade sang again that high, pure note, and this time it did not crack. They tested it thoroughly over the next 2 days. Darian flexed it, struck it, bent it nearly double and let it spring back. He ground the edge sharp and tested it on wood, leather, rope. He examined every inch under bright sunlight, looking for cracks or voids or any sign of weakness. The sword held. The weld between old and new was seamless, invisible even to his critical eye. The blade was balanced and true, and when he gave it a final polish, the folded steel shone like water in moonlight. "It is done," he said finally, handing it to Kera. She took it with trembling hands, holding it up to the light. The blade gleamed, and the old patterns in the steel seemed to dance along its length. She tested the weight, the balance, and a smile spread slowly across her face, the first truly joyful expression he had seen from her. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "Better than before. It will not break again, not unless you are very unlucky." She lowered the sword and looked at him, her eyes bright. "Thank you. I do not know how to repay you. You already did. You helped make it." He began packing away his tools, trying to ignore the strange heaviness in his chest. "Now you can marry your Thagger." Her smile faded. "Yes, now I can." The wedding was to be held in 3 days. Thagger's family would come to the camp, the elders would bless the union, and Kera would present her reforged dowry. Everything was arranged. Everything was as it should be. Darian told himself he should feel satisfied. He had done what he promised. The sword was stronger than ever, a piece of work he could be proud of. Kera would have her future, and he would move on to Millward and the next job. That was how it worked. You fixed what was broken and you moved on. But satisfaction felt a long way off. He saw Kera less over the next few days. She was busy with wedding preparations, and he had no place in those rituals. He kept to his wagon, maintaining his tools, preparing to leave. A few of the orcs stopped by to thank him grudgingly in most cases, but the gratitude was real. Even Garak gave him a stiff nod and said the sword was fine work. Elder Nasha came to see him the day before the wedding. She found him sharpening chisels in the back of his wagon, and she climbed up without invitation to sit across from him. "You are leaving soon," she said, "after the wedding." "I thought I would stay for that if it is allowed." "It is allowed. You have earned a place at our fire, Smith." She was quiet for a moment, watching him work. "She does not want this marriage." Darian's hand stilled on the whetstone. "She has not said that to me. Of course not. She is dutiful. And Thagger is a good man, as she told you. His family is respectable and they will treat her well enough. But she does not love him. She loves someone else." He set down the chisel carefully. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you are a fool if you do not see it, and I did not take you for a fool." Nasha's eyes were sharp. "She watches you the way a woman watches a man she has given her heart to, and you watch her the same way when you think no one is looking. That does not matter. She needs this marriage. Without it, she has no place in your clan. She has a place. She is one of us, dowry or not." The elder sighed. "But you are right that the marriage would give her security, a family of her own. And Thagger has agreed to it in good faith. To call it off now would shame him and his family." "Then what are you suggesting?" "I am not suggesting anything. I am only telling you what I see." Nasha stood, preparing to leave. "But you should know if she called off the wedding herself, if she chose another path, the shame would be hers alone. Thagger's honor would be intact. He could say the woman was flighty, and no one would blame him." She left before he could respond. Darian sat in his wagon for a long time after that, staring at nothing. The sun set, and the camp settled into evening routines: cook fires lit, children called in, the sounds of laughter and conversation drifting on the wind. He did not join them. He stayed in his wagon, thinking about folded steel and broken swords, about things that could be mended and things that could not. When full dark had fallen, he lit a lantern and pulled out a piece of good steel he had been saving. It was not large, perhaps enough for a long knife or a short sword. He had no commission for it, no buyer waiting. But his hands needed work, and his mind needed the simplicity of metal and fire. He set up a small forge beside his wagon, using a portable hearth he carried for roadside repairs. The work was meditative, heating the steel, shaping it, cooling it, shaping it again. He was making a blade, though he did not know yet what kind. Something small and practical, well-balanced, useful. The kind of thing a smith might keep for himself, or give to someone who needed it. He worked through the night, and sometime near dawn he heard footsteps approaching. He looked up to find Kera standing at the edge of the firelight, wrapped in a cloak against the chill. "You should be resting," he said. "Tomorrow is your wedding." I could not sleep. She came closer, looking at the blade taking shape on his anvil. "What are you making?" "I am not sure yet. A knife, maybe, or a short blade." He plunged the steel into the forge again, heating it. "Something for myself." "You do not make things for yourself often." "No." She was quiet, watching the steel glow red, then orange. "Darian, can I ask you something?" "You can ask." "Why did you really fix my sword?" "The truth." He pulled the steel out and returned to hammering, the blows echoing in the pre-dawn silence. Why had he? Because she was in his way, he had told himself at first. Because the sword was good steel and deserved better. Because a smith did not leave work undone. But those were only part of the truth, and he knew it. "Because you were crying," he said finally, setting down the hammer. "And I thought I could help." "That is all." He turned to face her, and in the firelight her copper eyes were very bright. "No," he admitted, "that is not all." She took a step closer. "I am supposed to marry Thagar tomorrow. I am supposed to present my sword and speak the vows and join his family. Everyone expects it. Everyone has prepared for it. I know. But I do not want to." The words hung between them, fragile and dangerous. Darian felt his heart beating too hard, too fast. "Kera, I want to stay with you." She said it quickly, as if afraid she would lose her courage. "I want to keep working at the forge, learning the steel-making things. I want to travel and see new places and make blades that will last generations. I want—" her voice broke slightly. "I want you." He stood there, hammer in hand, and did not know what to say. A dozen reasons crowded his mind. She barely knew him. She was giving up security for uncertainty. Her clan would disapprove. Thagar would be shamed. It was madness. But he wanted it too. Wanted her beside him at the forge. Wanted her laughter and her questions and her steady hands. Wanted to teach her everything he knew and learn from her in turn. Wanted to stop traveling alone. "If you call off the wedding, it will cause problems," he said carefully. "I know. Thagar will be humiliated. His family will be angry, I know. And you would be giving up a secure future. I cannot offer you land or wealth, just a wagon and a forge and the road. I know that too." She stepped closer still, close enough that he could see the firelight reflected in her eyes. "But I would rather have the road with you than a secure future without you." He set down the hammer and turned to face her fully. "Are you sure?" "I have never been more sure of anything." He reached out slowly, half expecting her to pull away, and touched her face. Her skin was warm, softer than he had imagined. She leaned into his hand, her eyes closing for a moment. "Then I would very much like you to stay," he said quietly. She smiled that true, joyful smile and kissed him. The wedding did not happen. Kera went to Elder Nasha at dawn, and told her she could not marry Thagger, that her heart had chosen another path. The elder listened without expression, then called for Thagger and his family. The conversation that followed was tense and uncomfortable. Thagger was a good man, as Kera had said, and though he was disappointed and stung by the rejection, he handled it with dignity. His parents were less gracious. They accused Kera of deceit, of using their son, of bringing shame on both families. But Elder Nasha held firm. The girl has made her choice. She will live with the consequences, but the choice is hers to make. Thagger, you have been treated poorly, and for that I apologize on her behalf. But you are free now to seek a wife who truly wants you, and that is worth more than a reluctant bride. Thagger studied Kera for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I suppose it is. He turned to Darian, who stood quietly to one side. You are the smith. I am. You made her sword. I did. And now you are taking her from us. She is choosing to come, Darian said evenly. I am not taking anything, Thagger grunted. Then, surprisingly, he held out his hand. Treat her well, Smith, or I will come find you. Darian shook his hand. I will. There were other conversations, other tensions to smooth over, but by midday it was settled. Kera would leave with Darian, and the clan would accept it. Some of the orcs were relieved. Inter-species relationships were rare and often complicated, but at least it meant one less mouth to feed and one less dowry to worry about. Others were disapproving but silent. A few, like Elder Nasha, seemed quietly pleased. You will need this, Nasha said, pressing a small pouch into Kera's hands. A wedding gift, even though there was no wedding. Inside were seeds, vegetable seeds, herb seeds, grains. The kinds of things you would plant if you wanted to settle somewhere to make a home. Thank you, Kera said, her voice thick with emotion, for everything. Be happy, child. That is thanks enough. They left that afternoon, Darian's wagon rolling south toward Millward with Kera sitting beside him on the driver's seat. Her reforged sword was wrapped carefully in oilcloth and stowed in the back, along with her few possessions. She kept looking back at the camp until it disappeared behind the hills, and Darian saw tears on her cheeks. Regretting it already? He asked, though his tone was gentle. No, never, she wiped her eyes. But they are still my people. Leaving is harder than I thought. We can visit. When we pass through this region again. She smiled at that. You mean when we pass through together? Yes, together. They traveled for 2 weeks before reaching Millward, a mid-sized town that served as a trading hub for the surrounding farms and villages. Darian had contacts there, merchants who sold his work, a smith who let him use his forge for a small fee, an inn that offered clean beds and decent food. He introduced Kera as his apprentice, and if people found it odd that she was an orc, they kept it to themselves. Coin was coin, and Darian's work had a good reputation. They stayed in Millward for nearly a month. Darian took commissions: a set of hinges for a new barn, kitchen knives for a merchant's wife, a plow blade for a farmer. Kera worked beside him on all of it, her skills improving rapidly. She had a natural talent for the forge, an instinct for the metal that could not be taught. He found himself relying on her more and more, trusting her judgment on the work. At night, they rented a room at the inn, one room, which raised a few eyebrows, but again no one said anything directly. They were tired most evenings, their hands blistered and their backs sore from the work, but they were happy. Happier than Darian could remember being in years. I have been thinking, Kera said one evening as they sat by the window watching the sun set over the town, about the sword. What about it? It is mine now, truly mine. I do not owe it to anyone, do not need to present it to prove my worth, so what should I do with it? Darian considered. You could sell it. It is valuable, the craftsmanship, the history. A collector would pay well. I do not want to sell it. She shook her head. It is my family's blade. My grandmother carried it and her mother before her. It should stay with me, but I do not need it as a dowry anymore." "Then what?" She looked at him, her copper eyes serious. "I want it to be a wedding gift, ours." His breath caught. "Kera, I know we have not talked about marriage. I know it might seem too soon. But I know what I want, Darian. I want to be your wife. I want to build a life with you at the forge and on the road. I want," she faltered, then pushed on. "I want to be your partner in everything." He reached across the small table and took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "I want that too," he said quietly. "More than I can say. Then let the sword be our beginning. Not a dowry to buy a marriage, but a gift between equals, a symbol of what we have made together." He thought about the sword, the broken blade he had found in the mud, the long hours of reforging, the way she had stood beside him through all of it. It was not just her sword anymore. It was theirs, in a sense. They had made it together, old steel and new, two people working toward a common goal. "I like that," he said. "But I want to add something. If the sword is our wedding gift, then I want to make you something too, something just for you." "What?" "A blade of your own. Not your grandmother's blade, but one made by your hands and mine. A smith's blade for a smith." Her eyes went bright with tears, good tears this time. "I would love that." They were married a week later in a small ceremony at the edge of town. There was no orc elder to bless the union. No human priest either, just a local magistrate who performed civil marriages and did not ask too many questions. A few of Darian's merchant contacts attended, along with the innkeeper and a handful of curious townsfolk. It was simple and quick, the vows straightforward, but when Darian took Kera's hands and promised to stand beside her in all things, he meant every word. Afterward, they returned to their rented room, and Kera unwrapped the reforged sword. She held it up between them, the blade gleaming in the afternoon light. "This is our beginning," she said, echoing her earlier words. "What we have made together. And what we will continue to make," Darian added. They hung the sword on the wall above the bed, a reminder of broken things made whole, of second chances and reforged futures. That evening, Darian gave Kera the small blade he had been working on, the one he had started the night before her failed wedding. It was a knife, beautifully balanced, with a handle wrapped in leather and a pommel made from a piece of the old sword's tang, carefully reworked. The blade bore his maker's mark, the first time he had marked a piece with both his initials and another's. Kera traced the marks with one finger, her expression awed. "It is perfect," she whispered. "It is yours, for your work. Every smith should have a blade of their own." She kissed him then, fierce and grateful, and he held her close and thought about the strange turns life could take. A month ago, he had been alone on the road, expecting nothing more than another job in Millward. Now he had a wife, a partner, and a future that looked nothing like what he had imagined, and yet felt exactly right. They stayed in Millward through the summer, building their reputation and saving money. By autumn, they had enough to buy a small piece of land on the outskirts of town, just an acre, with a shed that could be converted into a forge. It was not much, but it was theirs. They built the forge together over the course of 2 months, laying the stone and brick, installing a proper chimney, setting up an anvil that Darian traded a month's worth of work to acquire. Kera worked as hard as he did, hauling stone, mixing mortar, staying up late into the night to finish one more section. When it was done, they stood back and looked at what they had made, a real forge, solid and permanent, with space for 2 smiths to work side by side. "It is beautiful," Kera said, her voice filled with pride. "It is home," Darian replied. They lit the forge for the first time on a cold autumn evening, the fire roaring to life and casting dancing shadows on the walls. Darian heated a piece of steel, and Kera worked the bellows, and together they forged the first blade in their new forge, a simple knife, well balanced and sharp, the kind of everyday tool that would serve someone faithfully for years. When it was done and cooling on the workbench, they sat together on the threshold of the forge, watching the fire settle into glowing coals. "You miss your clan?" Darian asked quietly. Kera considered the question. "Sometimes. I miss Elder Nasha and some of the others. But I do not miss the life I would have had, always wondering if I was enough, always trying to prove my worth. Here, I know my worth. I see it in the work we do, in the blades we make. I see it in your eyes when you look at me." He put his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "You are worth more than 100 dowry swords." She laughed softly. "Good thing, since I only have one." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the coals glow, and Darian thought about the road that had brought them here. The rain and the mud, the broken sword, the weeks of work at the traveling forge, the moment she had chosen him over security, the sword hanging on their wall, old and new steel welded into one. "We should make a sign," Kera said suddenly, "for the forge. Something to let people know we are open for business." What should it say? She thought for a moment. "Xavier and Zaroth Smithing, partners in steel." I like that. He stood, pulling her up with him. "Come on, we can sketch it out tonight, forge it tomorrow." They went inside their small house, little more than 2 rooms and a loft, but cozy and well-built, and Kera lit the lamps while Darian pulled out paper and charcoal for sketching. They sat at the table, heads bent together, designing their sign. Kera suggested flourishes and designs, while Darian worked out the practical aspects of how to forge and mount it. "What about your traveling?" she asked at one point. "You have spent your whole life on the road. Will you be happy staying in one place?" "I thought about that," he admitted. "And I think we can do both. We can keep the wagon, take commissions in other towns during the spring and summer when the weather is good, but we will always have this place to come back to, a home forge and a road forge, best of both." She smiled. "I would like that. I want to see more of the world. There is so much I have never seen, never done. Then we will see it together." The sign was finished a week later, a heavy iron piece, elegantly lettered with a sword and hammer crossed beneath the names. They mounted it above the forge entrance, and Kera stepped back to admire it with her hands on her hips. "We are officially smiths," she declared. "You were officially a smith weeks ago," Darian pointed out. "You forged 3 excellent blades last week alone. I mean together. As a team. Xavier and Zaroth Smithing, partners in steel." She grinned at him, her tusks catching the light. "It has a good ring to it." "It does," he agreed. Word spread quickly that there was a new forge in town, and soon they had more work than they could handle. Farmers brought broken tools to be mended. Merchants commissioned knives and decorative pieces. A wealthy landowner ordered a full set of gates for his estate. Darian and Kera worked long hours, but they were good hours, satisfying hours. They developed a rhythm in the forge, each knowing where the other would be, what they would need, how they worked best together. People talked, of course. A human man and an orc woman working together, living together, married. Some disapproved. A few refused to commission work from them. But most people cared more about the quality of the work than the species of the smiths, and the quality was excellent. Within 6 months, Xavier and Zaroth had a reputation that stretched to neighboring towns. Winter came, and they stayed close to home, working on personal projects and larger commissions that required time and care. Kera made her first sword, a beautiful piece, balanced and deadly, with patterns in the steel that echoed the old Dowry blade. Darian watched her work with quiet pride, offering suggestions when asked, but mostly letting her find her own way. When she quenched the finished blade and it sang that pure, clear note, He saw the same joy on her face that he felt every time a piece came out right. "You are a true smith now," he told her. "That blade is as good as anything I have made." She held the sword up, studying it critically. "It is not perfect. The edge needs more work and the balance is slightly off near the tip. It is your first sword. It is allowed to be slightly imperfect." He took it from her, testing the weight and balance. "But you are right about the edge. We can work on that tomorrow." She smiled. "I like that word. So do I." They spent the evening polishing and sharpening the blade, working by lamplight long after most of the town had gone to bed. When it was finished, Kera wrapped it carefully and set it aside. "I am going to give this to Elder Nasha," she said, "when we visit the clan in the spring. A gift to show her I have not forgotten where I came from. She will appreciate that. I hope so." Kera was quiet for a moment, staring at the wrapped sword. "Do you think she knew that I would choose you?" "I think she suspected. She is a wise woman." "She is." Kera turned to face him, her expression thoughtful. "I never thanked her properly for giving me the choice. For not forcing me to marry Thagger. You can thank her when we visit." "I will." She crossed to where he sat and settled beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. "I am glad you found me in the mud that day. So am I, even though I was blocking the road. Especially because you were blocking the road." He kissed the top of her head. "Best delay I ever had," she laughed, and the sound filled the quiet forge with warmth. Spring came and they took to the road as planned, the wagon loaded with tools and supplies. They visited the Orc clan first, and the reunion was emotional. Elder Nasha embraced Kera like a daughter, and even Garak grudgingly admitted that the smith had done well by her. Kera presented her sword to Nasha, and the elder accepted it with tears in her eyes. "This is fine work," Nasha said, studying the blade. "You have learned well. I had a good teacher." Nasha glanced at Darian, who stood quietly to one side. "Yes, you did." She turned back to Kera. "Are you happy, child? Very happy? Then I am happy for you, both of you." She handed the sword back. "But I cannot accept this. It is too valuable, and I am too old to wield a sword properly. Give it to someone who will use it." In the end, Kera gave the sword to a young orc woman in the clan, a girl of 15 who dreamed of becoming a warrior. The girl accepted it with awe and gratitude, and Kera spent an afternoon teaching her basic sword forms. Watching them, Darian felt a swell of pride. His wife was not just a smith. She was a teacher, a mentor, someone who could pass on knowledge and skill. They stayed with the clan for a week, sharing meals and stories, before moving on. Over the next months, they traveled through a dozen towns, taking commissions and building their reputation further. Everywhere they went, people remarked on the quality of their work and on the unusual partnership between human and orc. Most reactions were positive, but not all. In one town, a group of men tried to run them off, claiming they did not want monsters working in their community. Darian stood his ground, and Kera stood beside him, and eventually the town's mayor intervened and allowed them to stay. The men who had caused trouble found their plows mysteriously breaking a few weeks later, shoddy welds that failed under stress, and no one in town would repair them, except Xavier and Zeroth, at triple the usual price. "That was petty," Kera said after they left the town. "Maybe, but satisfying." She grinned. "Very satisfying." By the time autumn came around again, they returned to their home forge in Millward, their wagon filled with coin and their reputation stronger than ever. They had commissions waiting, and more arrived every week. The small forge on the edge of town had become a known destination, a place where people could get quality work and fair prices. One evening, as they sat by the forge watching the coals settle after a long day's work, Kera said, "I think I am pregnant." Darian nearly dropped the cup he was holding. "What? I think I am pregnant," she repeated, her hand moving instinctively to her stomach. "I have missed 2 cycles and I have been feeling sick in the mornings. I did not want to say anything until I was sure, but I am fairly sure now." He set down his cup carefully, his mind racing. A child. Their child, half human, half orc, a blending of 2 worlds just like the Reforged sword. "Are you happy about it?" he asked cautiously. She smiled, that beautiful smile that still made his heart skip. "Very happy, are you?" "Yes." The word came out rough, choked with emotion. "Yes, I am very happy." He crossed to her and pulled her into his arms, holding her gently as if she might break. She laughed against his chest, and he felt the vibration of it through his whole body. "We are going to be parents," she said, wonder in her voice. "We are." "Do you think we will be good at it?" "I think we will try our best. That is all anyone can do." They sat together as the forge cooled, making plans and imagining futures. They would need to expand the house, add a room for the child. They would need to be more careful about which commissions they took, especially after the baby was born. But they would make it work. They had made everything else work after all. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Kera continued to work at the forge through most of it, though Darian insisted she take on lighter tasks as she grew larger. She grumbled about being coddled, but secretly seemed pleased by his concern. The townsfolk were curious about the child. Half-orc babies were rare in human communities, but generally supportive. A few women offered advice and hand-me-down baby clothes, which Kera accepted with gratitude. The baby was born in early spring, during a thunderstorm that rattled the windows and turned the roads to rivers. The midwife said it was a good omen. Spring rain meant growth and life. The birth was long and difficult, and Darian spent most of it pacing in the other room, listening to Kera's labored breathing and the midwife's calm instructions, feeling utterly useless. But when the midwife finally called him in, and he saw Kera exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in soft cloth, all the fear and worry vanished. "It is a girl," Kera said, her voice hoarse. "A healthy girl." Darian knelt beside the bed, looking down at his daughter. She had Kera's green skin, though a lighter shade, and tiny tusks that would grow more prominent as she aged. Her eyes, when they opened, were a striking blue-gray his eyes. She had small pointed ears and dark hair that stuck up in wild tufts. She was perfect. "Hello," he whispered, touching one tiny hand with his finger. Her grip closed around it, strong for something so small. "Hello, little one. What should we name her?" Kera asked. They had discussed names during the pregnancy, but now, holding their daughter, Darian found that none of the names they had considered felt right. He looked at Kera, at the reforged sword hanging on the wall above their bed, at the tiny life they had created together. "Mira," he said finally. "It means peace and wonder." Kera smiled. "Mira Xavier Zaroth, I like that." Mira grew quickly, a healthy and curious child who seemed to inherit the best traits of both her parents. She had Kera's strength and determination, Darian's careful attention to detail. By the time she was 2, she was already following them around the forge, watching everything they did with solemn concentration. They made her a small hammer, light enough for her to lift, and she would help by tapping on scraps of metal while they worked. Life settled into a new rhythm. They still took to the road in the summers, but shorter trips now, never going too far from home. Mira traveled with them, wide-eyed and excited, learning the names of towns and the faces of regular customers. People were generally kind to her, and the few who were not found themselves politely, but firmly shut out of any future business with Xavier and Zaroth. One evening, when Mira was 3, Darian found Kera standing in the forge, looking up at the reforged Dowry sword that now hung above the main workbench instead of their bedroom. They had moved it when Mira was born, wanting it to be part of the forge, a reminder of where they had started. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, coming to stand beside her. "About how much has changed," she said softly. 4 years ago, I was sitting in the mud, crying over a broken sword, thinking my life was over. Now I have a home, a forge, a family, everything I never knew I wanted." "Do you miss anything from before?" She considered the question. "I miss the clan sometimes, but we visit them every year and that is enough. This life, our life, is better than anything I imagined." She turned to him, her copper eyes warm. "You gave me that, you and that reforged sword." "We gave it to each other," he corrected. "You could have gone ahead with the marriage to Thagar, you could have chosen safety. But you chose this instead. You chose to take a chance. Best chance I ever took." She kissed him, soft and sweet. "Thank you for stopping that day. For not just going around me. Thank you for blocking the road." They stood together in the forge, the sword gleaming above them, and Darian thought about the strange alchemy of life, how broken things could be made whole, how chance meetings could change everything, how two people from different worlds could forge something stronger together than they ever could have alone. Mira came running in then, her small hammer clutched in one hand. "Papa, Mama, come see, I made something." They followed her to her small workbench, really just a stump with a flat stone on top where she had been hammering a piece of copper. It was bent and misshapen, barely recognizable as anything, but she held it up with such pride that Darian's heart swelled. "What is it?" Kera asked gently. "A sword, like the one on the wall. I am going to reforge it twice, just like Papa did." Darian knelt down so he was eye level with his daughter. "That is very ambitious. Reforging is difficult work. I know, but you will teach me, right? You and Mama." He looked at Kera, who was smiling through tears, and then back at Mira. "Yes," he said, "we will teach you. Everything we know. When I get bigger, when you get bigger. For now, you can practice on copper and soft metals. Learn the basics." "Okay." She hugged them both, fierce and quick, then ran back to her workbench to continue hammering. Darian stood, slipping his arm around Kira's waist. Together they watched their daughter work, the small hammer ringing out in the quiet forge. Above them, the reforged sword gleamed, old steel and new, broken and made whole, a symbol of everything they had built together. "She is going to be a great smith one day," Kera said softly. "She has good teachers." "She does." Kera leaned her head on his shoulder, and they stood there as the afternoon light slanted through the forge windows, painting everything in shades of gold. Outside, the world went on, towns and villages, roads and rivers, people living their lives. But here, in this small forge on the edge of Millward, a family had found their place. A human man, an orc woman and their daughter, bound together by love and steel and the choice to believe that broken things could be mended, that different worlds could merge, that two people willing to put in the work could forge something that would last. The Dowry sword hung on the wall, no longer a symbol of obligation or lost hope, but of transformation. It had been broken and reforged and broken again and reforged again, each time coming back stronger. Just like the people who had saved it, and in the end that was what mattered. Not where you started, but what you chose to make of what you were given. Not the breaking, but the reforging. Not the tears in the mud, but the choice to stand up and try again. Darian and Kera had chosen to try. They had chosen each other, chosen the hard work of building a life together, chosen to believe that love and partnership could overcome any obstacle. And in return, they had been given something precious, a home, a craft, a child, a future. As the sun set over Millward and the forge fire burned low, they stood together, watching their daughter work with her tiny hammer, and knew that whatever challenges came next, they would face them the same way they had faced everything else, together at the forge, building something that would last.